And we are live with the PHU Dynasty Podcast, episode 36, post week 6 discussion, pre week 7 discussion. And we have two very, very special guests today on the podcast. There's a lot to talk about this week, and we have Kentucky Elk General Manager Justin Gilchrist on, along with Lionheads GM Vincent Padronani on as well. So, welcome to the podcast. And you guys excited to be on this time? It's been a while.
As excited as you can be, I think, coming from our positions on, not officially giving up on the year, but also on the outside looking in on this playoff picture right now.
Yeah, I took the plunge last week, but I'm excited to be on the best podcast in the business. So it's a privilege.
A privilege, he says. Well, let's start off this week by doing some discussion on last week. So last week was our first ever throwback week, and unfortunately, my team decided to take on the role of my former team, the Blowouts, and start winning games and making playoff pushes, which is not exactly what we're trying to do this season. I took down the 110-75 victory over the Chili Cheese Fries, and it was a spirited effort from my squad that I really wasn't hoping for, and none of the pre-game moves that I made helped my cause whatsoever. I traded Jeff Wilson away, who did nothing, and I traded for Mecole Hardman, who decided to have the game of his season so far. So my pre-game tanking efforts did not pan out, and Deion Jackson decided to have the game of his career as well with 18 points, and Brandon Aiyuk decided to be Brandon Aiyuk and scored 20. So 110 was my highest score of the season.
You'd have beaten half the league with that. You'd have beaten five people with that. Me, Sean, James, Alex, and of course Dustin here.
Yep.
And then Tibbs, so 6 total.
And that's kind of with I guess you can call 20 a down week for Jalen Hurts too. I mean, if he had done his normal 30 to 33, I mean, you'd be talking about contending with the Scavellis, perhaps. You never know. Yeah, it's been a rough week at Texas headquarters here because, I mean, we've been watching a lot of Bijan tape, and it's not looking good.
It is funny because you pulled that off while getting a combined 2.5 points from your flexes.
That's what I was hoping for too. Yeah, because those flex players really did great stuff, and they just didn't. They did their part of the. They held up their end of the bargain there, but the rest of the team not so much.
Brandon Aiyuk may be on the first plane out of there.
I gotta tell you what, Brandon Aiyuk.
Oh yeah,
he's too good for this team.
Leave him in Buffalo. He can't come back to Texas.
No, I think he's got to stay where he belongs. I mean, it's rough out here. Anywho, let's not talk too much about that shit game. Adam's team just didn't do anything at all. He got 0.8 from Garrett Wilson, 0.7 from DJ Moore, 0.4 from Mike Boone, 0.9 from Isaiah McKenzie. Those were great tanking efforts. You got to really appreciate that.
Even Pat Mahomes came with only a respectable 24. He didn't want to,
no 40.
He didn't want to look bad, but also doesn't want to win the week for him.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, and trading for DJ Moore is a good tank piece because
that's what I should have done
in there, and he's probably going to be better next year. I mean, the quarterback situation can't get any worse, but he ain't going to do nothing this year.
Even still, in 4 weeks, he has less than 15 points combined. I mean, that is tanking material right there. If you're trying to tank, you want DJ Moore on your team right now.
Exactly.
The only thing that can derail that tank is if he gets traded to a good team like the Chiefs or something. That would hurt the efforts. But for now, it's looking excellent. And frankly, all he really needed to do was just lose to me. I mean, the rest of the games he's probably not going to win anyway. So, all right, let's move on to the next game. The next one I have on my list is the Muskrats versus the Lionheads. Vince, why don't you break down that game for us?
I mean, for me, it's the injury plague season. If I didn't trade Dustin for David Montgomery, I literally would not have had a running back start last week. And one of the big reasons I did want to trade for David Montgomery is also because I wouldn't have a running back this fucking week if I didn't trade for David Montgomery. And as it stands, if James Conner doesn't play, then it's David Montgomery and Kyle Juszczyk or J.D. McKissic. And I think that little anecdote there kind of sums up where we're at. I mean, we have people like Cam Akers who just died and suck, and James Conner has been hurt, and Javonte got hurt. Um, and yeah, in this game, we just didn't have it. We got the goose from MVS, which was brutal. The Gasecki, the Tunyon start over Gasecki. Tunyon had a great game. He had 90 yards, but Gasecki had 2 touchdowns.
Thanks.
I started Pickens instead of Claypool.
Okay, thanks.
What?
Sorry, I was talking to my wife.
Oh, no. It's all good. Tell her I said hi.
Yeah, Pickens 2.8, is a little bit. Of a
Yeah,
low
and
as well.
Claypool had a big game. Kind of just decisions like that. I mean, even the quarterback one was minor, 20 to almost 14, but still, those things added up, and yeah, it just wasn't good enough to get it done. And Alex had a couple big games from his running backs in Ramadra and Brees Hall. The rest of the team really didn't perform, but I think across the board, this was a pretty bad week of football in what is shaping up to be a pretty bad fantasy season of football as well. And it might just come down to who's healthiest and who can grind out at the end, because a lot of the studs aren't studs, and even some of these middle of the pack people we thought would have production kind of left for dead.
Yeah, so in the Muskrats too, didn't put up their best performance. We've come to expect maybe a little bit more out of that team other than 109. But that's just enough to get it done this week. Even though you got some pretty disappointing performances. Devin Duvernay 1.4, Hayden Hurst 2.1, Jeff Wilson to 0.5 after
Trading for
4.
Jeff Wilson and starting him to just getting shitted on. That's
tough.
impressive.
That is tough.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough for both parties, really. I mean, neither of us got what we wanted out of that.
Yeah, I mean, Alex has he has exactly what he designed the team to have. Some horses at running back, and he's going to need them to stay healthy and stay producing if he's going to want to ride this into the playoffs.
He also traded for Kyler Murray too, only getting 15 points in his debut as a Muskrat.
He did. Could have started Jimmy Garoppolo, or could have kept Trevor Lawrence. And
yeah, Trevor Lawrence got like
that.
10 more points than that.
Yeah, I get why he did it. He was panicking. He did not want to lose to me, and so he was just trying to get whatever he could by any means. But I think that begs the question: this team's about done making moves unless they're lateral moves, because he kind of exhausted. Like Pat Fryermuth was someone who's not really helping today, but still has a lot of value long term, which is of course why you wanted him, Dustin. Just like Trevor Lawrence, guy that's not maybe. His value long term is bigger than his redraft value today, but Alex is absolutely all in, so he has to get a guy like Kyle Murray and who's more ready to win now than a Trevor Lawrence, because the Cardinals need to win now more than the Jags do. So I get it, but I don't know how it's going to work out as far as the season long grind goes. There's some good teams, and we should talk about them more, because obviously Alex and I both stink. So yeah, Dustin and Dan. That's like speaking of a good team. Dan, didn't have the best week, 128, but in this grindy week, 128 is pretty good. That'll beat most people this week, and it came up against Dusty, who was rebuilding. Dustin.
Yeah, I mean that's one reason I decided to pull the trigger last week. Going against I was 1-4 going against the best team in the league. There wasn't much hope left. In that 1-5, it's just not going to happen. So going against him is one of the main reasons I decided to take the plunge.
Yeah, if you look at some of the performances last week for the Chupacabras, 0 from Elijah Moore, who's been a massive disappointment this year.
Oh my gosh,
It's been. I mean, I was hyped for him this year for sure.
Yeah, me too.
Then you get Najee Harris. I mean, he finally got a touchdown, but it's been a rough sled for Najee this year.
Oh yeah.
And apparently, they keep talking about him losing touches. It hasn't really happened yet, but let's see who else we got here. We got Darnell Mooney actually showing up a little bit with 12 targets, but 6.8 points is kind of like the cap. It seems like.
Irv Smith has 4 catches for 7 yards and a touchdown.
I didn't even know that was possible.
Less than 2 yards a catch.
Like 1 point something yards per catch. He must have got like tackled for like a loss on one of them or something. Like I didn't watch the game fully, but there has to be a reason for that. It can't be that.
Yeah, maybe he got a screenplay or something.
They just fucked them over. I could see that. It's just like we've been talking about all season. I mean, I like the talents on this team as far as just overall guys that I like. I like Olave. I like the talents of Elijah Moore. I like Dubes. I like Mooney. I like all these guys, but they just don't do anything. So
Yeah.
we just need something good to look at. But over on Dan's side, like you said, not the best week for him, but he got the performances out of his tight ends to pretty much get him over the hump, and then of course those receivers are solid as usual. So he should be just fine. He heads to 6-0. The next matchup we got is I guess you could say the best matchup, even though it wasn't the highest scoring, was the Los Angeles Lambs versus the Hartford Honey Badgers, 105-100. Both teams projected for over 130, and neither of them got there. Neither of them got close even. But it was a grindy game. Justin Herbert for James's squad, 8.4 points. It's not good. That anybody that plays Denver is immediately brought down. It seems like
By association.
just being on the same field as Russell Wilson.
Quick note about Herbert. I think any other team would have kind of be starting to worry about Herbert, not long term, but at least specifically for this year, just because they really kind of don't seem to have it together. But I would say that doesn't really apply to James, because the reason they don't have it together is because they targeted Austin Eckler 16 fucking times. And James has Austin Eckler, so it doesn't really bother him that their offense looks like shit, because that is resulting in more Austin Eckler touches. He had 14 carries and 16 targets. That's 30 intended touches for Austin Eckler. So yeah, if Justin Herbert's going to throw it 57 times and barely any of them are going to go past 10 yards, I think James will be a little bit okay with that, when most people would be very upset. And I think the downfield passing will kind of come. They are missing their left tackle. Keenan Allen hasn't played in a month. I think they'll
he's
be
definitely
okay,
missing Keenan Allen.
Even still, James is insulated by the fact that he has Austin Eckler. And the rest of James' guys played okay. I mean, Mixon and McCaffrey both had pretty good weeks, especially considering what a grind it was. And I'll let Eric take it from here real quick. But Eric, Mike Evans, thought he would be one of the studs of the week against a Pittsburgh secondary that was really banged up, missing 3 starters, and he only gets 4 targets for 42 yards.
It's just the Bucs offense is frankly a joke right now. They don't understand how to utilize their best weapons, and frankly, Byron Leftwich has to be on the hot seat. I mean,
he's coaching himself out of a head coaching job.
I mean, there's nobody going to hire him now. He should have taken
he should have taken the job while he had the chance.
That was it, because it's now painfully obvious that when the team gets into 2-minute drills, when Brady's calling the plays basically in the huddle, the offense looks infinitely better. So it's just there's clearly something wrong within the coaching staff. I mean, if you watch the game and see some of the throws Brady's making, it's not Brady. It's they're just not throwing the ball down the field. It's probably because of the offensive line, but it's rough.
He's trying too hard to establish the run on the early downs, and it's clearly not working.
They should just throw it every play.
Yeah.
Just
one thing Eric pointed out that was a bit of an eye opener for me was that the Bucs offense is like in 1992. They don't do any motion. They don't do any pre-snaps, things like that. And that's another thing that I think it seems to have gone out the door with Arians a little bit, was kind of running a modern NFL offense that can keep offensive guessing before the snap. And they just look very vanilla, but like you said, not targeting a player like Mike Evans. I don't think that'll happen going forward. I just can't see how I cannot see it happening if the Bucs are going to survive this year. James grinded it out and got the W, but I think there's still a lot to like on Sean's side. Tyreek Hill is on pace for 2,000 yards. Lamar Jackson had one of his worst weeks. I think if he could have got 25 from Lamar Jackson, we're talking a little bit different light about this team. The Kamara trade, he got pretty decent value on that, and Kamara played pretty well. A lot of low single digits from other guys who aren't really necessarily maybe the main contributors on this team, but have stepped up in times in this year and given Sean those big scores, like Dallas Goedert and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They combined for 5.5, and there were times earlier in the year where they were both getting between 15 and 30. That was giving Sean those massive, beefy scores. But this is a hiccup, and sometimes games grind like this.
You're getting Melvin Gordon on Monday night, 3 for 8. He only needed 5 points, and he just couldn't do it. It's just rough out here. That
Yeah.
I don't feel good
So-
about any Broncos anything.
No.
Except the kicker, who is on James's team,
I
and he
guess
had
that
12.
worked out. Yeah, yeah. So, and then the last game that we have to discuss here is the Baton Rouge Bombers or the Louisiana Hurricanes versus the Battle Axes. 177 to 129, the high score of the week for the Bombers, probably their highest score of the year, if I can't remember
I
correctly.
think it is, and it
Um,
was against the third highest scorer of the week. So really brutal for Scavelli that he had to play Justin. He really made it look like it was no contest, but Scavelli would have beat the shit out of most other teams this
And
week.
Scavelli's points against, if you look at the standings, are right up there with our good friend Dustin, who are just seem to be taking beatings every week. For Baton Rouge, goes to 5-1, probably their best start in the last 5 years. I mean, as far as I can remember, it seems
Maybe
like
ever.
they probably ever. I mean, Jamar Chase finally had the big game that he's been waiting for, 26 points.
With
you know,
Burrow, which was 57, that's almost enough to beat Tibbs right there just from his 2 Bengals.
Yeah, I mean, but and the fact that Higgins was hurt for a decent majority of that game helped out too, for those totals. And then Kyle Pitts actually got a touchdown despite only having yards, and they just refused to use him still.
Juju
Uh,
too.
Yeah,
Juju had a
decent
really
game.
good breakout game. And there's a team that's going to need that now that Marquise Brown is going to miss at least a month. They say up to 6 weeks to 2 months with a foot injury.
I was thinking that was going to be the whole year, so that's good.
They originally announced
Ken
the whole
Walker
year.
coming on strong too.
Ken Walker is going to be a borderline league winner. The way that
Yeah.
offense is moving, and he looked like nothing for 4 weeks. Like this is going to be a
Right.
red shirt year for him. And now he kind of may have just solved Justin's running back problem that he
Yep.
needed so desperately. And we still have Cordero Patterson, who should come back this year too. Justin's depth has kind of been tested a little bit, but I would say Josh Jacobs playing as well as he had and Ken Walker, it's kind of made it so we don't need to rely on Zeke as an RB1 or 2 as consistently as we thought leading into the year. And this team obviously looks just fine going forward.
I did have a question before we move on from Ken Walker. Now this is very so this is Justin's team after all. Do you prefer Kenny Walker, Kenneth Walker, or Ken Walker? What would be your, if you had to pick one of the three? Because I feel like Kenny Walker sounds like a great fantasy running back. But
Kenny
then I heard
Walker does.
Hey,
I heard
the
Justin say
fewer
Ken.
syllables, the better. It's easier
Oh,
to say
okay.
Ken.
I like Ken
say
too,
Ken.
but I think Justin's gonna like Kenneth.
I
It
feel like
definitely
Justin would
sounds like
like
he's
Kenneth.
a knight Kenneth Walker.
Sir Kenneth Walker.
Exactly.
It sounds very good. I just wanted to get your opinion. Hold on. Well, Justin Sr. in the chat likes Kenneth Walker the third.
Keith.
KW Trey.
KW3.
But that doesn't answer the question. Is that Kenny Walker? Is that Kenneth Walker? What is this? Well, we'll let them discuss and then maybe chat in here in a second. But that wraps up our review from last week. Let's quickly talk about week 7. We have some interesting matchups, and we won't go into a ton of detail because we have some other stuff to get to on this podcast pertaining to the Kentucky Elks. So let's talk about. Actually, we'll keep it on the Bombers. It's Bombers versus Armadillos. 5-1 versus 1-5. This is a must-lose game for the Armadillos, and frankly, the Bombers just needed to keep plugging away here. I have a terrible bye week situation. I lost Jalen Hurts this week, so that looks good for me.
That being said, these are the games that the Bombers love to lose. I don't want to get into details about it, but coming off of a huge game, it would be really old Bombers like to come and lose against you.
It would be Hurricanes-esque.
That would be very Hurricanes-esque. You're right, and I think we're turning the page on that franchise. We're not the Hurricanes anymore, we're the Bombers, and even though we still got the old logo and sleeper for me, I don't know if he's changed it or not, but
he's the only guy to never change it.
I think this is going to turn the page, and I think he's gonna win, and I think he's gonna move on to 6-1, where he'll be tied with. We'll talk about this next matchup, Dan, who's gonna be 6-1 after I beat him. This no, just kidding. My team again is hurting, like I alluded to. My running back issue, my quarterback situation's not sexy, and with God King Cooper D Cup out this week, I'm gonna be praying all day Sunday for a small miracle. And Dan, he has his own bye week troubles with Jefferson and Dalvin as well and others. So he's only projected for, which is for Dan, a lowly 125, but I'm only projected 104. So I don't feel too great. Dustin, you want to talk about maybe you and Tibbs a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Now, given where I am, I certainly don't want to win this matchup.
But does it matter
So-
knowing that he has your first? Well, I guess your second will be higher.
Well, my second, yeah, because I mean, I'd rather it be 2-2 than 2-3. You know.
Yeah, and you can't change what's done, so who gives a shit what
Yeah.
pick you give Tibbs at this point?
I would
Exactly.
personally love it if you could just pull out a win this week, but let's create that 1-5 muck. This is what we're here for. 1-5.
Man, I thought you
that
want-
would be kind of funny.
You want Tibbs to pull off the win. That way,
That's what I'm saying.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's. Oh,
I need-
man, that
I-
would be interesting.
I mean, you guys are projected for 1 point. It looks like 1.5 difference right now. So it's going to be a real. I'm going to be watching that game more than my own. I'm excited.
Well,
All
Dustin
right.
has to. He has to get a new kicker. He's cheating right now.
Oh, yeah,
Dustin.
that's true. I don't have
Hey, listen, if you're going to enter this tank bowl, you got to play by the rules, okay? I'm starting my best players every week. You better be too.
Hey, you know what I'm doing now is all I'm doing is looking at the Fantasy Pros start sit, and I just go with what they say, so that no one can accuse me.
No one
of
can
not
come
starting
back to you
them
later.
right.
You have
I respect
evidence.
that. I respect
Yeah, I've got the evidence. I got the receipts to prove it.
that.
I love it.
That's
So we got
just
two
fine.
really good matchups for these next two. We got the Sean O'Shea, the current Hartford Honey Badgers, but we all know they're long gamers, versus Toronto Battle Axe Scavelli. I think
Pretty good
these two.
game.
I don't want to. Think they're a little bit better for bye weeks than most. I know they have like Singletary and Henderson, but Oh God, never mind. It's Stephon Diggs and AJ Brown. Jesus Christ, those are two massive players. Yeah,
Yeah.
they still got a little
Banged
bit
up
hurt.
Jonathan
They're both
Taylor.
hurt for bye weeks then, but they play each other.
Yeah, you got a banged up Jonathan Taylor for the Honey Badgers / Long Gamers. Lamar Jackson has been a little banged up too. You're the Dolphins fan. Is Mostert good to go this week, or is he still kind of on the mend?
I don't really know yet. We're waiting to see. We have the Sunday nighter, so I think they're trying to drag it out a little bit. But like I know Waddle was limited today, and I wasn't sure about him. So it's one of those that we will have to wait a little bit. But do you really want to start a Dolphins running back? We've been a little rough running the ball this year. I
Yeah.
know Mostert had some good game against the Jets, but
You're gonna get like 6 points out of that.
yeah, but you have upside at touchdown because I do think we're a good offense and we do move the ball. So there is some nice touchdown upside here. But Sean still has the depth. He still has like Kareem Hunt and Clyde on the bench. So I'm not too worried about him. I think he's gonna have a nice lineup this week.
Getting
but,
a healthy Sun God too.
The Sun God is healthy and he's real hyped up. I was reading.
Oh, very exciting.
Scavelli.
Yeah.
A little more rocky because he's starting guys like Marvin Jones and Russell Gage, but he still has those horses: Fournette, Aaron Jones, obviously Henry and Barkley are monsters.
Yeah, so I think that'll be one of the better matchups for sure, even though there's some banged up guys. And then you have the Muskrats versus the Lambs in what I consider a primetime matchup. I mean, both these teams, Alex's team has exceeded expectations, and then James has really come back from the depths after his 1 and 2 start. So I'd say the Lambs are probably the favorite for me at least, but kind of depends too on the health of some of these guys on the Muskrats, mostly with Swift and Higgins, I would say. Both of those guys play a pretty big part.
Usually I don't like to harp on matchups because it's something we talked about a little bit earlier and it is such a big deal. James has his big stack, his Herbert Eckler stack playing against the Seahawks, who are atrocious. And I do figure that offense to put up a lot of points. So I think that game's going to be a shootout. And I think that's one to watch. I think if James gets his points, gets big points from that stack, I think he's going to walk away with a W this week.
I mean, James also has a tight end in line. He's got his big Taysom Hill starts now, so he finally figured out his tight end position for the time
Thursday
being.
night too, so we'll really get to see.
Set the tone.
Well,
exactly.
what if-
Are we gonna get that 30 burger from Taysom Hill or the 3?
Well, what if Taysom Hill starts at quarterback? Is he still going to be
Ooh.
eligible at tight end on Sleeper?
mean,
I don't know, man.
assume
That
so.
decision's gonna have to be made within like 22 hours. So
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how you do
that
it.
could be a nice cheat code for James there if that really does happen.
All right. Well, that is all of the Week 7 games, and I think. And Justin has just changed his photo into a Bombers logo. First time in league history, everybody. This is breaking news here on the podcast. He has changed it to, and the Bombers logo really does look nice and sleeper. Anywho, let's get to what people I think came here for the discussion, and it's the Kentucky Elk, and it's the moves they've made, and in the last couple of weeks here, he's definitely shook up the league after a very poor 1-4 start. Maybe we could start talking quickly about why you chose this time right now to make this decision with the organization. What was going through your mind?
I'm gonna mute my mic to prevent me from screaming at things.
Okay, perfect.
Well, it was time because I'm 1-4 playing Dan, so almost certainly was going to be 1-5. Some of my running backs were getting older, and I wanted to get value for them while I could. Particularly Kamara, because he's probably going to be suspended next year. So if I don't trade him this year, who's going to want him if he's going to be suspended for 6 games next year? So I wanted to get value for him, and then if I'm trying to get value for Kamara, I got to get value for the other guy. So it's kind of just a domino effect.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense to me, and I think just the only thing that I would say league members are maybe shaking their head at is, if we're calling this a soft rebuild, is what you posted. Can you explain to us what a soft rebuild looks like in your eyes?
Well, it's less than a 5-year Morales rebuild.
Well, that's obvious. I mean, come on.
But I mean, I'm going to try to compete next year, but realistically, it's probably going to be 2024 because my running backs are just going to be too weak next year unless I hit the lottery on one of my 5 third-round picks next year.
So let me ask you this: how does Najee fit into that plan? Hypothetically, we're talking about 2024 as a year of you competing. Najee Harris would be 26 by then, looking at probably a contract year for Pittsburgh. Is it something that you might be trying to look off of moving Najee before then, or ride or dying with Najee? Like, this is our plant the flag player.
Yeah, I mean, well, I traded so much for him, even though it's a sunk cost at this point. I still feel like I want him on my team for a little bit, but it's, even though he's 24, he really doesn't have much wear and tear because he didn't start till his last year in college. And I mean, he's getting a ton of carries in the NFL, but I think if the Pittsburgh offensive line became better, I still think the talent is real. There's no reason he can't still be strong in 2024. And it's not like I'm giving up on 2023. Like, I'm not going to try to tank next year, but if I'm being realistic, it's going to be tough to make the playoffs. But I'm still going to shoot my shot.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you. If someone offered you, though, a good deal, I mean, a really great deal, I don't just mean good, I mean great, for Najee, I think, obviously, like you said, you'd consider it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, for the right deal, I have to,
And I think the next thing I was going to touch on is we've talked at length about, a lot of these guys being, wide receiver 2s, wide receiver 3s, some middling talent. That can be a very good thing in a rebuild in the sense that you're going to have a deep team. But my only question is, where are you going to get the top end talent from without major first round picks? Because you're not going to have one this year. You're only going to have one next year as of right now, and then 2 in 25. So without these first round picks, where do you think are you just going to have to hit, these third and second round picks pretty much? Is that your hope, or are there plans to get first round picks somehow?
I mean, getting 2023 first, the cost is just so high right now. I mean, if anyone wants to throw an offer my way, but realistically, that's probably going to be tough to get. But the thing with the receivers is they are a lot of wide receiver 2s now, but I still see a high ceiling for a lot of these guys. Like Olave, I think, could be a future wide receiver 1. So I think I have some high ceiling talent already on the team. It just might be a matter of time of waiting for these guys to hit.
No, I think if you traded some of your receiving talent, I think they're so young and they are so talented with a good draft pedigree like Bateman,
Yeah.
Olave, and Smith, I think it would set your
And
rebuild back. You'd be
right,
talking more of that tear down rebuild. And I kind of think
right,
once you trade one, unless you could really get a king's ransom, like yeah, if someone offers you 2 firsts and 2 seconds for Devonta Smith, you fucking take that. But
right.
short of something like that happening, like you can't really part with any of these players at value.
Exactly.
'Cause I feel like if you part with them at value, we're just pushing this back more and more. That goes with
Right.
any player, really. Like even Najee, like
Hmm.
his value right now is about like a mid first. But I feel like if you took that, you would just be spinning your wheels more.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
I also get Calvin Ridley back next year, and if he returns to form, he could potentially get back to wide receiver one. Is his head in it? I mean, who knows? But I think he's as good of a shot as anyone to reclaim the wide receiver one spot.
Let's quickly talk about the fact that Dustin is basically going to own the third round of the 23 draft. He has 5 of the 10 picks in the third round of this draft. I'm so excited to see who all these guys are. It's going to be a flood of mid-round talent.
Yeah, I mean it's supposed to be a deep class, so 5 dart throws, maybe one will hit a bullseye, and I'll get a solid running back.
The third
That's
round
the
has been
hope.
strong in recent drafts. There's been some hits, but let's talk about these trades they made recently. I think they're worth talking about for sure. The first one was my personal favorite, was the 4th round pick swap and Tyler Bass earlier in the year. I love that with Scavelli. This is just a total nothing trade. Those are my favorite. And then we also had
Hey,
the Tony Jones trade.
Tyler
Another
Bass
nothing.
is a integral part of my rebuild. He's the future of the elk.
It makes perfect sense. All right, then we got Alvin Kamara and a 24 third traded away for Khalil Herbert and a 25 second. That was a very interesting trade at the time. Khalil Herbert. At that time, did you expect this to be a 100% rebuild for this year?
Yeah, that's what I was shooting for at that point. Yeah.
So yeah, at that point, you had committed to the soft rebuild.
Well, yeah. Once, yeah, Kamara was the first domino, and everybody just fell in line.
I mean, Vince, do you think he got good value for Kamara there?
Well, I think the value is okay because I like Herbert. I think he's very talented. I think a second is nice, even if the second's very far away. The only thing that I start to question a little bit is I think Kamara was our best chance. Now we would have had to, of course, add with him, but I feel like giving Kamara and maybe packaging him with maybe some expiring assets, like you know Tony Pollard's a nice now piece, but is he really ever going to be a starter? Maybe Jacoby Myers, another guy like have some now value, but are they really a big picture guy? And try and get a couple firsts with it. I would say is kind of my only criticism. Now I know it's tough to make those firsts appear out of thin air, especially for the
Yeah.
people who are competing. But I do feel like it was something that maybe taking 80 cents on the dollar to get a first over time may look better than a lot of these odds and end draft picks that are really going to be one of those things that it's going to be some of the total parts at the end of all this. You kind of look and see like, all right, well, you had over 2 or 3 years, you had 12 thirds and 4 or 5 seconds. And what did those
Right.
become? Because they're not, half of those are probably not even going to hit. And that's just not you. That's everyone. They're just so hard to hit at. And first round picks are a
Well,
little bit easier, even those can bust, as a
what
lot
if
of us can
we're
tell you.
living in a world 6 months from now, and Kamara's been suspended for 6 games, and David Montgomery wasn't re-signed. Khalil Herbert is now the starter there. Would you really say at that point that that Kamara's value is still higher than Herbert? Because I think at that point Herbert's has got to be higher. And I'm not
No,
saying
part
all
of that
that's
is
going to
the
happen, but if it,
incubation of Herbert over time, and Kamara will take the dip, like you said, based on the suspension. It's just more that I think you only had one chance to obviously rip this Band-Aid off and acquire
mm-hmm.
future firsts. I don't think what you did is bad. I think you got second round picks are pretty high premium picks. I think
Right.
thirds are where we start to not consider them premium, but seconds I consider premium picks. And I do like Herbert a lot. I like his talent a lot. And like you said, Dave Montgomery is a free agent next year in a stacked free agent running back class. Saquon's a free agent. Miles Sanders is a free agent. Montgomery's a
Mhm.
free agent. Just off, I think Jacobs is free agent too. I think all those four off the top of my head are
Yeah.
all free agents. Yeah, it's an absolutely stacked class. I'm sure Melvin Gordon's going to be a free agent. I don't think he's signing there. Um, so I definitely think that he will be a player that has a really good uptick next year. I just think that once kind of Kamara settled, I didn't think there was enough odds and ends at that point left to accrue a first without giving up a player that we consider part of the future. Do you think that's fair to say at least?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's a good assessment.
And
I
also
mean,
think-
honestly, I shopped him around, but I wasn't the value I was hoping to get, and that was pretty much the best I could get. So I might as well take the best I can get, I guess.
Well, I would say that build is absolutely speaks to your point about a soft rebuild, because if you're gonna be good next year, it's gonna be because a player like Herbert
Right.
comes out of nowhere, and today, it would be out of nowhere right now. But
Mhm.
maybe by, like you said, maybe by this time in April, we're talking about how that's Herbert's job, and he's a 5th or 6th round redraft pick at that point,
Yeah.
looking as like a flex redraft RB2 in redraft. I think more of the story of your team is that I think a lot of your assets that were coming into the year underperformed pretty much across the board. I mean, we have the Bears stack, all three Bears, Mooney, Kmet, and Montgomery. Then we have Kyler Murray, who was in constant negative game scripts and couldn't really get to his running, which is his bread and butter, because he was in those game scripts. Najee, same thing. Elijah Moore nosedived. So despite even having like a nice uptick from a guy like Olave, it just still wasn't enough.
No.
And then we also got the actually, speaking of some of these other tradable assets, at this time, Amari Cooper was one of them. That could have been perhaps thrown in for maybe a higher pick, but he ends up getting traded along with Taysom Hill and a 4th for a 22 third, 24 second, and 25 seconds. So I do like the value for sure on Cooper getting 2 seconds and a 3rd in this year's draft. So I like that a lot. And then after that,
I would have much rather the picks been earlier, but James didn't have those picks.
But you got two of them plus a 3rd. I mean, if we break this
exactly
down to Cooper versus 2 seconds and Taysom Hill versus the 3rd, I think you got great value on those if you individually cash those out. So put them together, I still think that's a pretty good cash out. This is a deal that's going to be bittersweet, because I do think you got the better value of it, but I think James is obviously going to be feeling the rewards for 2 full years before you can start actually reaping the benefits. However, the upside for you is these are so late, and this James's team is kind of in a window stage. By 2024-25, those could be top 15 picks.
Yeah, his team's aging, so
we always talk, or at least Sean and I talk about, I always consider a premium pick to be top 15. So anything up to 2.5 is, to me, you can get a very, very good startable potential player in the first 2 rounds. So if James could very well be in that kind of 5 and 6 muck, towards the end of the 24 season if things don't pan out. And then we also have this other trade made with the 2 of you, is Robert Tonyan and David Montgomery, for a 24 second, which was Scavelli's, and a 23 third. The 23 third, if Vince's team continues to trend, could be closer to a 2nd. But this is early in the season, and Colin
it would be
Granson.
like 24ish, give or take. But
yeah, I guess for this trade, Tonyan looks to be ascending every week. So for a team that like yours that actually could use the tight end with Darren Waller being banged up, I like the trade for sure there. And I think Montgomery, as I feel like he gets quite a bit of negative press, it seems like, in the Twitter world, and frankly he plays pretty well. And I think it's just because Khalil Herbert has come in and looked good off the bench. I don't think David Montgomery is a slouch in any sense of, like, I think he's going to be fine. And even if it's not with Chicago next year, he's still going to get chances to play. And I think he's just being his value is a little depressed. That's all right now.
Well, I
yeah,
think
and he's an underrated pass catcher too. He doesn't get enough credit for the job he does with that.
that's a good point. And he also played an offense that wasn't really moving the ball with pass catching, so it's tough to
Right.
say like he's been featured in that role. I kind of look at it as like guys like Chase Edmonds, Mostart, and like Rojo were kind of considered like pretty hot free agent running back signings this past offseason, and pretty much with the exception of Mostart, have been pretty big busts. So I feel like a guy like David Montgomery will absolutely have a market for him, especially because there's all these teams that have free agent running backs. There could be a team, I hate to say this, like the Giants, who are just like, we don't need to invest in Saquon. We can let him walk, sign a cheaper guy, and invest elsewhere. Especially because that's kind of how Buffalo's run it, more through the wide receivers than through the running backs. That's where DeBoll came from. So I think there is plenty for him, for him in the future, but he's absolutely not the best player. There's nothing that David Montgomery does that I think anyone would say he's top 5 or top 10 at. He's just solid at everything. He's a solid running back, solid in pass protection, solid in catching, can run the ball between the tackles, can run the ball outside okay. But he's just not, he doesn't excel really at anything. But I really needed the running back, and I had draft capital. Dustin and I talked about, we kind of went back and forth that he really wanted my second next year, but I really wanted it for, really wanted to try and draft a quarterback next year. It's such a good class. That kind of feels where quarterbacks will start to go. So I really wanted to hold on to that, but I definitely realized that David Montgomery is absolutely worth a second round pick. So I knew I had to pay that. I'm not so sure Robert Tunyon's worth, like what Eric said, is going to probably be picked 24, 25. If I get lucky, maybe 26. But I didn't mind paying it, especially with getting David Montgomery. And I think it was pretty good on both ends.
Yeah, I think
it goes kind of with your timeline too.
If you look at in past years, those 25, 26 picks, they end up being, the first tight end off the board in most draft classes, which this year you get Trey McBride, who he basically gets a redshirt year. Almost every tight end gets a redshirt year.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to be waiting regardless. So to get a guy like Tonyan, who actually plays and is in an offense tied to a good quarterback, I can't say that that's a bad move at all. I would rather have Tonyan than the third. So, and he still has a lot of upside, I think, too. I mean, he is 28, but I mean, he came off a bad injury last year, I thought he was one of the sleepers last year before in redraft leagues before he got hurt, because he scored so many touchdowns the year before.
I look at him tied to Rodgers. I think he'll go as long as Rodgers goes there. I think as soon as he starts to become that journeyman tight end, the best we're hoping to get at that point is a Gary Barnidge season.
Oh yeah, but like I said, you paid a third, so it's not like you can't.
And in a package deal, package deal too.
Yeah, sure.
And I needed it with Gesicki looked like shit until he had 2 touchdowns this past weekend. And like you said, Waller was banged up, so it was definitely a move that I felt the value was there and I needed to make.
And then the last trade, perhaps I guess you could say it's the biggest, or the biggest names perhaps, is Kyler Murray goes to the Muskrats, and in return, the Elk got Trevor Lawrence and Pat Freiermuth. Personally, I thought it was, value-wise, it was pretty good.
For who?
I think it's good for both sides, to be honest with you. I mean, for Alex, he needed that quarterback. We gave him shit on probably 17 straight podcasts about his quarterbacks not being good, and he did something about it. Now, like Vince said earlier, he kind of traded his last available chip, proverbial poker chip, to get that, I guess top whatever, quarterback. But Pat Freiermuth was kind of his last guy that, is really tradable at this point. So, would you guys agree that Alex is in full all-in mode? This is it? I mean, this is the final form?
Yeah.
I mean, I keep thinking that, and then we keep going a step further. So I'm not going to put it past him to do something wild and, maybe move an injured player and a young player to get another older guy. But I think the next moves are going to be things that just come up. I feel like this was the last expected move, if you will, was upgrading that quarterback position.
Yeah, I think he's the only person we've ever had in league history that literally has no picks for any of the next 3
No,
years.
he has 0
like
picks.
not even one. Yeah,
I don't think that's ever
he'd
happened.
probably trade his supplemental draft picks if he could.
Oh, he for sure would. 100%. I mean,
Hey, I'll take him.
You know, from your side of things, yeah, of course you will. You're looking for anything right now. You're looking for every
I'll
scrap.
take the 7th rounder.
He's looking for the he's like a vulture right now. He's just out here looking for anything. What's that? You got a little 3rd round pick? I'll take that.
Yeah, throw it in. Kylan Granson, throw it in, Vince.
No, yeah, Kylan Granson. How could we leave him out, Eric? How could you leave him out?
That was the key part of that deal.
He came back to me and said, "All right, we'll do the deal if you give me Kylan Granson."
His 3 targets a week, you couldn't just pass. You can pass him.
I had to take a walk around the neighborhood to know if I really wanted to part with him. But after some soul searching, I came back and said, "Okay, we can get this done."
It's hard to part with that elite production.
Awesome.
So, but back to Alex. You know, like you said, this was the move that really puts him on a timeline because I thought Trevor Lawrence was a better long-term player than Kyler was at quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I think Kyler is kind of, you know, we're already having questions. They're questioning his allegiance to football over Call of Duty. I think that's a really low point in any professional player's career, that they think that you don't love your craft as much as that you love getting called obscenities by 12-year-olds on Xbox. Like,
well, and the fact that they put that in the contract originally, that just tells you everything you need to know.
Exactly. And even if it wasn't real, which it's pretty much confirmed that it was, it's just a bad look all around. That being said, you know, Kyler is a great modern day fantasy quarterback. He's a good passer and he's a great runner. And one of the things that I like about him as a runner more than a lot of other ones is he gets down pretty well because he could slide from baseball. So I like the move. I am a little worried that the Cardinals are in the middle of a lost year, but that may result in a lot of passing volume for Kyler.
Yeah, I'm a little bit down on Kyler this year. I think almost everybody is. And frankly, I'm not so sure in Arizona what ends up becoming of the coaching staff. I mean, I know that Cliff got a 7-year extension, which was one of the worst extensions in probably league history, if you think about it. He's done really nothing outside of, you know, getting the team to the playoffs and just getting shit canned in the first round. I mean,
Eric, what would you rather have for your franchise, the Russell Wilson extension or the Cliff Kingsbury extension? Go.
I'll take the Russell side because
really, you want him at age 40 on that contract?
Well, I'm not saying at age 40. I mean, I'd like to cut him at age 38, but
okay, you deal with the Russell Wilson more than Cliff. You're saying.
What I'm saying is that I still think there's an outside chance that Russell, you know, turns it around. I don't see Cliff turning it around. I really don't.
Agreed. His schemes are atrocious.
Towards the cap, they can cut him. They can't just cut Russell
Well,
Wilson.
if you're talking about cap space and stuff, of course I'm going to take the coach. But like, if you're saying, you know, both things considered, and cap isn't really a discussion, I would like to see where things go with Russ. It's been 6 games. You know, I want to see.
That's fair.
Maybe there's a shot he turns it around. I mean, obviously, we've all watched the Broncos. There's no hope right now. But I guess the only thing I could say is that there's still time. But right now, I think the problem with Russ too is just the amount of just negativity with Russ. I mean, he does nothing to help himself.
He welcomes the criticism with how he acts.
And it's just these stupid videos. He's such a cornball with these Subway commercials and the freaking Mr. Unlimited thing. Like it feels like
that was the beginning of it.
I know. It's like I feel like he's like a character and not a football player. Like he's almost like trying to. It's like this big charade and he doesn't really care about football. Like I don't even know what
he's on
it is.
my franchise mode in Madden, and that he's the created player. Like that's how he approaches this. That everything revolves around him. And that
I don't know. This is one of the best quarterbacks of the last decade. I feel like you're just throwing all that out the window. You know, you're acting like it's. I don't know. Like when I think of the distraction, I think of like the Deshaun Watson thing.
Oh, I mean, of course,
he's that much. I just don't think he's anywhere close.
He's given absolutely no Broncos fans hope with his play. The play has been horrible. I mean, it's a disaster scenario in terms of on-field performance.
But I mean, how much of it's his fault? Like, I mean, the coaching.
That's a whole nother thing. All right, Gundy.
A lot of it's his fault. He deserves
Hackett or Kingsbury.
Oh, don't do that to me. Can I have
I'll take
Hackett because I can
Kingsbury.
fire him sooner? But like they're both a bad. Like them, Zach Taylor, like these are all coaches that just don't inspire confidence in me. They're carried by the talent of the players around them. Zach Taylor, I know, is never going to get fired. You know, Marvin Lewis never won a playoff game, and they still didn't fire
No,
him.
their
Zach Taylor
ownership
went to a
never fires
Super Bowl.
anyone.
He's going to die as Mike Brown's coach.
100%. I just feel like with Kingsbury, I don't even think they're going to fire him after this year if they suck, because I think Steve Keim and him and ownership, they're just too tight where it's just not, they're going to just not do it. I don't know. I don't have a good like analysis for it. I just feel like the way they've built that team and how much they've invested in him, I have a hard time believing they're just going to dump him. You know,
I think he and Kyler are tied together, and that's their windows.
Yeah.
They're going in on him and Kyler together. Once one starts to show cracks of this is clearly not the future, or like he lost the locker room type stuff, I think that's when they'll start to realize like, all right, maybe Kyler lost the locker room or had issues. They'll cut him, and then in a year or two they'll cut Cliff. Like, I don't think either of them are going to have an out. Like, they're going to play the majority of their career with the other person. They're stuck with them. Quite frankly, because they're both stuck with both the contracts. What else can you do?
I think that actually bodes well for Kyler's fantasy, outlook though, because I wonder if, let's say Kyler was with a Nathaniel Hackett, like he wouldn't even be relevant. Maybe like it's just he could be in that Russell Wilson zone. I mean, right now, as far as like what's being produced on the field. I mean, at least with Cliff's offense, he's gonna run the ball, he's gonna move around, and there's gonna be opportunities for fantasy points.
What about Cliff's defense? That won't stop anyone.
They're so bad.
So he'll always have to be fighting for his fucking life to come back in games if they want any shot to win. But enough about the Alex side, though. Let's talk about the Dustin side. Like I think Trevor and Pat are both two huge upside, long-term dynasty pieces. Like Eric talked about, you have to redshirt a tight end. And Pat Freiermuth, was a second-round pick, I want to say.
Didn't even have to redshirt him last year. He played
he wasn't even redshirtable. I would say he was pretty decent. He had touchdown regression, which is expected, period, when you have to get 8 touchdowns as a rookie or 7. And so now it's kind of like playing in a way worse offense. Ben kind of needed those short guys. So I could see Pat Freiermuth having a really nice uptick as time goes on and as he grows with Kenny Pickett.
And they're both 23, Vince. They're both 23. You love to see that.
Well, yeah, that goes back to kind of what I was saying with the soft rebuild, because both those guys are guys that can start next year. I don't need to wait. I mean, I feel like they're both the future's bright. So
I like that trade the most probably out of any of them. Because you have Dak
in that one. What'd you say?
What's that?
You still have Dak though, right?
Yeah, I do have Dak.
So you really didn't need Kyler. Like, I mean, yes, it was. Right. He's the better of the two options, probably fantasy wise. But from a value perspective, you definitely made the right call, because one of those two had to go if you're going to do a rebuild.
And Dak's values in the shitter right now. You would never have gotten what you just got from Kyler for Dak.
Maybe this is proprietary information, but earlier in the offseason, this is before I even decided on a rebuild, I was offered a trade by Mr. Dustin Gilchrist here. It was Trey Lance for Dak, straight up. That was a fun one. Sean and I were both at the Carolina Hurricanes game, and I got that trade. I was like, ooh, this is very interesting, very spicy. But I was still undecided on where I was going to be at, so I didn't make the deal. But if I was contending, I would have probably pulled the trigger.
I'm still all about Trey Lance if you want to.
Well, we'll discuss.
If you want to discuss.
That's what this podcast is all about, is stewing these trade offers. We love We love the trades. All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up there, unless you guys had anything else.
We got to talk about one player that Dustin picked up because he loves all the quarterbacks. He's really the future quarterback in this league, and that is Bailey Zappi.
Oh man,
that's my favorite pickup you've made. He's going to be the future. You'll see it. You heard it here first.
That's my boy.
I mean, yeah, given how he played, it's like I can't even drop him now.
He's been good. He's definitely going to have the job of Hoyer's done for the year, but like he's the future backup at the minimum. But I think he's better than Mac. But I also hate Mac.
I don't even know. Like that offense is so weird too on a week-to-week basis. You just have no idea what they're going to do.
Another guy, Damian Harris of yours, who fucked you. What do you have, 17 touchdowns last year or something ridiculous? And
his touchdown rate was insane, but
Yep, and then this year.
I think he's got another guy. 2 this year.
I mean, he hardly plays now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was I guess you can call it the mini State of the Union for the Kentucky Elk. We felt like he needed to have the floor after making so many league moving moves.
Yeah.
So appreciate you coming on to discuss that. Appreciate you too, Vince, for coming on and
Thank you for having
discussing
us.
the moves. And I think next week we're going to be shooting for a mid-season roundup because it is week 7 will be the midpoint in the year. So that is amazing that we're already there at this point. First of all, and then second of all, it's been a really, I would say, would you guys agree that this has been the most like random year in fantasy, like as far as the players that are near the top and when you look around at the rankings, like, oh, this guy is somehow RB4. It's like, how is this possible? But in years past, I feel like it was maybe a little bit more by the book and maybe a little more chalky as opposed to what people thought pre-rank. Would you guys agree?
I absolutely agree with
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we'll have some good discussions next week because I think we'll probably go over some of the top players at each position and maybe talk about more so like the leaderboards and where people are at, and then where people are at points wise as well, because this is kind of the point now where we can start saying things have maybe solidified a little bit on where people are at this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can I say one thing before we go?
Oh, of
So,
course.
Hell yeah, it's your State of the Union. Do it.
fellow league mate Adam Thibodeau is trying to do everything he can to manufacture a rivalry between me and him.
He sure
But the
has.
reality is, you can't just create these things out of thin air. They got to happen organically. And he's made some attempts to take some shots at me, but he's just missing the mark. So, he needs to come up with some better content if he wants me to give him a response.
Dustin, how would you compare that to your terrible ways of coming at me last year? Like when you finally were in the 7 and 8 spot the whole year, and then you finally get to the 6 seed, and you're like, "I'm coming. This is it. This is my future." Vince, you're fucked. You're fucked. I was like, all right, guy. I'm just saying. You did that. Oh wow. Justin sounds like Dustin is perpetuating the rivalry.
It does sound
No,
like you're
this-
fanning the flames a little bit here.
Well, no, this is like when Keenan Allen tried to manufacture a rivalry with Mike Evans. Mike Evans is just on another level, and Tibbs is the Keenan Allen in this situation.
It's so funny is I actually remember that. That was like a Twitter off-season beef, wasn't that? Like Keenan Allen's like, I don't get my respect.
Yeah.
Look at Mike
And then
Evans
he
over
tagged the
there.
wrong Chris Godwin too.
I think it's going to be now that you're in the position you are with your soft rebuild team against Tibbs' team, which is kind of like in that same realm, I guess you could say. Like he's not quite, there yet. Like I think this is the time to have a rivalry. I'm very excited for this.
Yeah, but Vince has been my rival for years. We've had teams go against each other, knock each other out of the playoffs, have some close wins, some comebacks. Well, I haven't had anything like that with Tibbs. That's just like, these things got to happen on their own.
Even the year before, you took the 6 seed from me. I was the 7 and you were the 6.
Yeah.
Like 2 years ago, and it was by like 8 points or something like that. This
Right.
is a dynasty. Recently.
We've knocked each other out of the playoffs, and we've knocked each other out of a playoff spot.
Yep, all the classics.
Yeah,
but believe it or not,
good matchup.
You are now going to be grouped in with Eric and Tibbs because you are labeled rebuilding. So for better or
you gotta
worse,
go with the historical rivalry. You can't just create
That's
these
true.
new conferences like
Well,
they
that's the
try
thing is-
to in college football. It's like
your rivalry is competitively, whereas yours and Tibbs's is verbally. Like it's just it has nothing to do with on the field at all.
you guys have literally never been good at the same time.
yeah, exactly. But
part of me-
now we're bad at the same time. So I see your point.
At the end, I think it also helps too because I believe he owns your first, right?
That's why he really could get you.
Yeah, I mean, he really has a lot of leverage there. So you're gonna have to come up with some good content if this keeps going. And we're all about content.
I don't know if he keeps missing the mark though. It just doesn't warrant a response.
Wow.
I mean,
I'm excited now.
He's still in the middle of his rebuild too. I know he's got some nice rookies that look good and all this, but
Right.
it's a long way. It takes a while to get there to the top. I think that
Yeah.
he already has donated last year's winnings. Now he got this year. Next year's year 3. I would say if he's not pushing on the playoffs next year, wouldn't you have a little bit of a right to chirp him back? So
No, for sure. And I also think
Yeah.
that this week could be the real start of the rivalry. I mean, they're
They
head to
play.
head
I
this
don't
week,
know.
so you never know. So anywho, we'll drop it there, and then maybe we'll have Tibbs and Dustin on for a future podcast to
That sounds
go
good.
jaw at each other. Who knows? I also want to get some other guys on
It's
the
all
podcast.
love, baby.
Oh yeah, at the end of the day it is, but we love the hustle out here. So
Yeah.
we'll see y'all next week for the midseason roundup, and we'll cut it off right there. So thanks again for hopping on, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Eric.